we're rolling.
Okay, so you asked about the lesson horses. We don't own any ourselves.
Do you find most the boarders just naturally take instruction as well, or do you have some inactive boarders, or most of them are?
We make it pretty well known that we expect them to be in a program. I don't necessarily hold them to it, but either their horse is in a training program or they should be lessoning at least once a week. So, you know, if somebody has to go on vacation or they have an illness, I don't hold them to it. But everybody that boards here is pretty good about being involved, because that is, as I'm sure you'll discuss in the class, boarding does not necessarily cover all the expenses of the facility. So it is important that you have lessons and training as well, especially given that we have only 16 stalls, you know, compared to facilities that have 30 or 40 stalls that they can fill.
Right.
We don't have the volume. So we try to cater to those that want a little bit more of a active training program.
Okay. How's labor work?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I don't know
Yeah.
how much I should disclose.
Yeah.
We do a lot of it ourselves. One year, probably 4 years ago, we got an intern from Poland, the country of Poland. She had a J1 visa. We housed her for the summer here on the farm. We gave her a small stipend. And still doing it that way, it was expensive for us because we got workman's comp on her and did everything, you know, above board.
Right.
And it was still quite taxing on the business. So when looking at labor, and once you have to pay minimum wage, the taxes in New York are quite high as far as workman's comp and things like that. It's really hard then to put that back in the board price and have people willing to pay what board should really cost. So our workaround is that James and I do the majority of the work. I have one guy that comes in that I pay cash. And then the boarders, I have them help me when I need a hand, like for turning out at night, you know, and they just kind of know that unless they want their board to increase in price,
They pitch in
either,
a little.
it's
Yeah.
either hands on deck or the rate has to go up,
Yeah.
is the reality of how the business works.
Uh-huh.
So,
Okay. And James hasn't been here since November-ish, right? So
right.
so that's even tougher.
Yeah, so James is in the military. He's away for leave. And I tried to hire help in the fall, and I could tell it wasn't going to work. It was like 2 months in a row of not really making any profit. So then we kind of I changed some things. You'll learn to get efficient about how you do things. You took I think a video of our barn. The one thing about our barn that I really dislike is how long the aisle is for how few stalls are in it. It's a very nice, aesthetically pleasing layout, but it's a lot of walking. It's a lot of sweeping.
Right.
For not a whole lot of stalls actually down the aisle.
So, well, it's got wash stall, grooming stalls. All that takes space
Right.
that you're walking by.
Right.
But, yeah.
And you know, I don't wear a watch that tells me how many steps I take, but it's certainly a lot. You learn how to lay out your paddocks so that they're closer to the barn. So when you're the one doing the walking, you figure out how to be efficient.
Right. And what's your background?
So I have a pony club background. I grew up in New Jersey. I was in the Somerset Hills Pony Club, one of the oldest ones in the country. I rated up through my HA rating. So eventing was a big staple of my riding as a junior. And then in going to college, I dabbled in the intercollegiate program, but didn't really stick with it. And then my husband has a hunter jumper background from the West Coast and did some Grand Prix level stuff and working hunters. So the eventing matched with the hunter jumper background, so it's given us, I'd say, an advantage because any horses that come to us, we can be very diverse in what approach we take with them. And they may not specifically be a hunter or a jumper. They could be a dressage horse. They could go cross country. So it gives us more options with our clients.
Right. Yeah. How did you find, you've been here 6 years, there was an existing hunter jumper show circuit in the area. How did you find to mesh in and say where do we fit?
Yeah, so this area does not have a lot of competing barns because I'd say the equestrian sport in general is a little lacking in our area and the knowledge of equestrian sports. You get up toward maybe the Albany area or Connecticut, Northern Jersey, it's a lot more popular. So, some people were very inviting, others not so much. And then finding where to fit in, I thought there would be more willingness to see what we're about and a little bit more open-mindedness than there is in the area. On the horse show grounds, we're trying to incorporate some jumpers or cross-country, for instance, and it seems like only the people that really do that are the people that already have been doing it, instead of being open-minded and say, hey, what's this about? Let's try it. The hunter barns want to stay the hunter barns.
Human. We're kind of like the Eastern New York dressage and combined training. Coble skills, they don't even come our way too much. It's Saratoga, Chatham, and then Central New York is kind of Syracuse.
Right.
So you're kind of in a little bit of the Sahara Desert from a dressage and combined training standpoint.
Right. James calls it we're in the lost Bermuda Triangle between Binghamton, Syracuse, and Albany.
Right.
So, yeah, and it's like we're in the middle of nowhere, except we're centrally located. Within 3 hours, you could be in Rochester, you can be in Connecticut, you can be in Northern Jersey. So that way, the location is beneficial. But we've found it very tricky for those of us that want to event to just find places to school.
You're right.
So we're lacking opportunities and facilities that welcome you to come school on their property and get out of the ring and continue to ride on the grass.
Well, having the showgrounds, I mean, I'm not sure I know of another place that has such a nice place to ride. I mean, it's large, its footing's perfect, and, you can actually ride on it, and very often you just find you have an outdoor ring and an indoor ring, and that's it. And even then, the outdoor ring is almost never used. It's really the indoor ring. So
right. The polo field has really given us a whole new perspective on what we can do with the property, and then the ability to train young horses, because we can get them out on the horse show grounds or take them out on horse show days. And we already own the facility, so we're not paying horse show fees, and get them exposure that way before we start writing the check to go to a real horse show for the weekend. Because when you look at trying to sell horses and make that profitable, horses need to have show records for the most part, and that can cost quite a bit of money to go obtain the horse show miles between hotels, just the travel with the horse trailer, the entry fees. So if you have a young horse and you want to get him out 6 times, you could easily spend $2,000 just in horse show fees.
Right.
But the polo field allows us to do a lot of that with the greener horses earlier on to build a resume.
So, what are your biggest expenses as you kind of go through the month? And are any of them a little hard to control where others just kind of repeat themselves?
Sure. Labor is a huge part of it, and that's why the way we do labor is a little different. That's probably the hardest one of the group. We make our own hay, so we chose to make a huge investment of buying all the equipment, which is a lot of money up front. But when we looked at that investment over, say, 10 years, then because we're producing our own hay, granted it does take your time away from teaching and riding, but that seemed to save the money business over like a 10-year time, so we chose to do that. So therefore we don't have to write a check every month for hay.
Right.
And then actually the facility costs more than like grain and sawdust for sure, because we have a mortgage on the property, you have taxes on your property, and you need to upkeep, the lawn, the driveway, the arenas. Now you have tractors,
right,
and you have fuel for the tractors. So really just the upkeep of the facility is quite the burden. I think the grain and the sawdust, because we get sawdust from a local sawmill, is quite inexpensive in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I do tell students that as they are spending money, to take a look, and if they're spending money on something that is turning into equity, even though it's expensive, you just do it correctly, and that's to your benefit. When you're spending money on other things that are just then gone,
Right.
it's different.
For instance, James went and bought an excavator used, but they're still very expensive. But the excavator in the long run is going to be able to redo the driveway, build us banks and ditches for cross country. There's a multitude of things it can do. So whereas the money, we could have put that money directly into a driveway to hire it out, but then at the end of the day, all you have is a driveway.
Yeah, it's a driveway. Of course, I've seen the excavator. Only James can drive it, though. It seems complicated.
Well,
You have to have a relationship with it, I think, to drive it.
Right. And well, when you're a guy and you own a farm, I think that's part of the fun, right? You get to buy a lot of toys and justify them.
Right. That's right. So, jeez. All right.